Now it's time to start the meeting. Yeah, so good morning, everyone, ladies and gentlemen. At the start of today's seminar, I would like to extend my heartfelt thanks to the Dean of the Faculty of Educational Sciences at the University of Lodz, Professor Alina Wróbel, for her patronage of this seminar and her support in its organization. Thanks to her dedication and openness to scientific initiatives, we have the opportunity to meet here today and to host Professor Burke Johnson from the University of South Alabama at our faculty. Thanks you, Dean Alina Wróbel. And in this moment, in this moment is a good occasion to say something about the letter from the dean to the Professor Burke. So I would like to read the letter. Because our dean couldn't be with us today, and she sent this letter and asked me to read this letter officially. Dear Professor Burke Johnson, we warmly welcome you to the Faculty of Educational Sciences at the University of Lodz. We are honored by your presence. I'm certain that your lecture will enhance the methodological skill and enrich the research experiences of the seminar participants. I'm very grateful for that. I wish you a pleasant stay in Łódź, filled with many inspiring experiences. With best regards, Alina Wróbel, Dean of the Faculty of Educational Sciences at the University of Lodz. Dear participants, it's my great pleasure to welcome you to the seminar, Philosophical and Methodological Innovations in Mixed Method Research, led by estimated figure in the world of educational sciences and research, as well as mixed methods, already mentioned Professor Burke Johnson. Professor Burke has had a remarkable career spanning multiple continents and impacting countless students, researchers, and academics. With over 108,000 citations and numerous books and articles to his name, he's a true authority in the field of research methodology. Professor Burke was the executive director of the Mixed Method International Association and has contributed extensively to shaping how research approach research across both qualitative and quantitative methods. Some of you might be familiar with his work from foundational texts like Foundations of Mixed Method Research or Educational Research, Quantitative, Qualitative, and Mixed Approaches, which have guided many of people through the complexities of research design. In addition to his outstanding contributions to the academic world, Professor Burke has lectured and led workshops across the globe at the universities in North America, Europe, Asia, and Africa. His impact is truly international, and we are fortunate to have him here with us today. Attention, now a few logistical notes. Today's seminar consists of two parts, as you probably know, separated by a 20 minutes, not 50, 20 minutes break. The first part is devoted to an introduction to MMR, mixed method research, while the second part expands on this issue. At the end of each of parts, there is a 15 minutes space for the discussion. So we will have occasion to make some comments, questions. Professor will be with us in Dutch. Yeah.
Yes.
So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Professor Burke Johnson, who will be guiding us through today's seminar. Professor, the floor is yours.
Okay. Hello. So there's my name, and this is the title of this presentation. And you use any material, you can have access to it. You can get it from me, or Slavic will give you the copy. And I think he said he's giving many of you the copy already. So I'm going to go through it fairly quickly. I'm going to hit points. I'm not going to go through everything. This is like a small little book for you, okay? So there's much more material here that you can dig into, that you can study in more depth. And I've kind of given you a higher level, bring a lot of the key ideas together. And if you want to use some material from it, you can cite it as this, or send me an email, and I'll give you a more specific publication for what you're interested in. Okay? Look, it's not moving forward.
This tile was.
It doesn't work.
Technology.
Yeah.
It gets all of us, doesn't it? Well, one of the early things I'm going to do is I've got a three slide is comparison of qualitative, quantitative, and mixed methods research. And that can serve as a background if you have very little. I can also serve as information if you have extensive understanding, because on those three tables, those three slides, I compare these three approaches on a number of dimensions, like the objective, it's philosophy of science, it's analysis approaches, and things like that. So, we working now? Okay, so you have this, so I should not spend time there. So the first part of today is going to be an introduction to mixed methods research, and then I'm going to talk about what I'm going to call a new philosophy of science, or a new philosophy of social science called dialectical pluralism. Here's a definition. This is a this is a large definition of mixed methods research, and that's how I and my closest colleagues, how we define. We don't mean to exclude. Our definition of mixed methods research means to be inclusive, okay? And all of my work has always been to have an inclusive approach and an expanding approach, not a narrow approach, okay? So that's how I view mixed methods research. And you might notice that you can combine qualitative philosophies, paradigms, methodologies, methods, techniques, approaches, concepts, or language for you guys up there. Concept, okay? So bring these things together, and it's about mixing. It's about inclusion. It's about integration. Did I mess something up?
Again, this problem.
Maybe I'll sit here. I'll just be able to tell you when to go to the next one. Yeah.
Może będzie lepiej pomogę. Ale czy możemy w takim razie przy kamerze posłuchać?
I'm sorry?
What one? Not twice.
Oh, did I hit that?
Yes. Okay.
Okay.
It doesn't work.
Okay, so early in mixed methods research, by the way, mix goes back to the ancients. We didn't invent this stuff, us mixed methods people. This goes back to the ancients, and you can see it in ancient Greece. You can see it in Socrates, Plato for realism. Euclidean geometry wanting certainty. You can see it in, and then on the qualitative side, Protagoras, the sophists, arguing they've been hated by analytic philosophy in some ways, but arguing that things are more particular, more particularistic, and not universal truths. And then Aristotle, perhaps a little in between. In some ways, he is a little between. So qualitative and quantitative thinking goes back to ancient times, and it goes back before Greece and other cultures and places and so forth. So this is not a new idea. And it basically was an idea that its time kind of came in the 80s and 90s, and it was needed to help balance things, I believe. So let's see. The incompatibility thesis said you can't do these. You cannot mix. No, it's logically contradictory and impossible. Many of us take a more pragmatism viewpoint and says, well, you said it cannot be done, but I just did it, okay? And it helped me to answer my research questions. And for us, science is about answering our research questions and trying to advance knowledge and not saying what we can't do. If we can do something that will help us to advance scientific knowledge, let's try it. And there's so many more things we need to try as science includes its innovation aspect. Science needs innovation. Science needs, quantitative science is focused on quantitative theory testing, hypothesis testing, justification. Qualitative research comes more out of the discovery and exploration. And that, in one way, that's a circle of science. Exploration, testing, justification. The high abstract, concrete, right here with us. And I argue that mixed methods research is scientifically justifiable because we need both. It's that simple. We need both exploration and we need testing. Okay? So to me, it's kind of common sense. And in my training, I got lots of these in my training. So epistemologically, what the hell did I do? Okay. We want to make warranted assertions. We're not going to get final truth. Empirical research does not give final truth. Okay? Empirical research provides evidence that goes from weak to very strong, but not ultimate capital T truth. That's because science is open. Empirical research is open. How long is the future? Okay, think about that. So this is what I was just mentioning to you a moment ago. We can, these three tables here will compare qualitative, quantitative, and then show the mixed perspective. And if you go through those, I think you will see that maybe our reason for existence in the middle. One thing we like to use, I call it a both and logic. And that, for me, that actually goes back to Peter Abelard in the 12th century, and he wrote a book called Sic et Non. And that had to do with biblical interpretation. In Latin, that means yes and no. So for me, if we use that, and science advances that way, by trying to see what's good in different things and bring them together. So I use the both and logic, and also a dialectical logic. That is a logic of synthesis. I'm sure all of you know thesis, antithesis, synthesis. And in mixed methods research, we call that integration. So that's kind of our epistemology. So there's our ontology. This will give, if you are new to this or old to this, these tables will give you a lot of information. We could spend the entire time on these three tables. There's the first one, then this one goes into common objectives, what's it focus on, kind of data collected, and so forth. Research includes a lot of things, and Mix provides a place where we can listen to the best of both, or both of what is needed to answer our particular research questions. I mean, it's about answering our research questions. We don't want methods or methodology to drive our research, I don't think. We want to answer our research questions as well as we can for the advancement of social science or any kind of knowledge. So I'm giving you some of my opinions. These are my perspectives, but I want to share them with you, okay? Because that's kind of, I'm right in the center of this mixed stuff. So there's some more aspects of comparing the three. And remember, I said synthesis a moment ago. Integration, that's our word. Mixed methods research is about integration. What can we integrate? In dialectical pluralism, we're going to show you how you can integrate pieces of paradigms to help you in your particular research questions. Methods, data collection, sampling, data analysis, methodologies. I'll talk a little bit more about mixed methods grounded theory in the second part. And just note, this is just, there's some, but there are many more. That's the way I view science. Science is open to new knowledge, and we don't want to just do just what the giants before us did. We need to build on that and expand and keep moving. Mixed methods research. What is mixed methods research? I showed you a definition. One way of looking at mixed methods research is there are three big kinds. There's a lot of the early mixed methods research, it was argued, was quantitative, kind of mixed, okay? And that there's some truth to that. And there's also qualitatively driven mixed methods research. If your epistemology and your philosophy of science and your paradigms are more in the qualitative direction, that's fine. You can still do mixed methods research. The idea is to bring, if you're in the qualitative group of ideas, bring something quantitative into it. If you're in the quantitative type, bring some qualitative into it. In the US, in federal grants, it's historically been more quantitative because it wants national answers, federal policy, but they're realizing they need local knowledge too. And that's where quantitative and qualitative approaches can come together. And then I argue mixed methods. Who can bring it together? Us. But only us with working with you. Okay, so no, I take that back. Not just us, but some of this kind of thinking. So it's not really us, it's you all the way. So this is old. I don't like to call it qualitative. We call it qualitatively driven. I prefer that language than dominant. Some of my female colleagues told me it just sounds like a male metaphor there. I assume you all know what a paradigm is, so I'm going to spend very little time on that in our minutes. Let's see how I'm doing on time. I never started it. How much time do I have left? Maybe I'll just look at the 12:20. Okay, so I think you know what a paradigm is. It's a big worldview and includes ontology, epistemology, axiology, methods, methodology, rhetoric, all these things. And I'm not going to go through this, but I have some very interesting quotations from some of the leaders. I have some from Egon Guba here, and he basically said, you can't do it. You just can't do it. It's logically impossible. And I just explained that to you. Logically impossible. We live in an empirical world. We have logic and we have emotions and we have art. We have everything here. We don't just operate based on the operation of mathematics. Do this, have to do that, and so forth. So we can do many things. So that you can read this, okay, you guys? So there's a number of the paradigms, and you probably already know those. So I said I wasn't going to do it, but So those are some this is one way of defining paradigms. You can look at these different dimensions. Although I think Guba and Lincoln did not do a good job of defining epistemology. Okay, okay, thank you. So I'm just going to work through that. And you have all this to read. Constructivism, positivism. Now we like to use the word post-positivism because it's not traditional Comte positivism or the Vienna School, for example, logical positivism. It was really more post-positivism. I would have preferred the word neo-positivism, but they went with post. Here's some. If any philosophers are here, you want to get into some of the philosophical issues, go right here. Okay, so these are the divide in philosophy that they were arguing about. Okay, that's what these two slides do. And then I've already mentioned pragmatism to you. We want to answer our research questions. We want to contribute to science. Okay, that's our goal. So here's some more on paradigms. I'm just going to jump through this. Okay, and now I'm going to spend, I think, the rest of this part on dialectical pluralism, which is, I call it it's a philosophical process theory. It's about how we operate in a changing world. We operate in a world where we interact with lots of different positions, lots of different philosophies, lots of different methodologies, lots of different standards in different places of what is needed, the particular and the general. For us, both of those can be very, very important. I think that's the biggest, maybe one of the big divides in quantitative research. Quantitative research wants the general. Qualitative research wants the particular. So mixed methods research is interested in bringing those two together to give greater understanding. So I'm going to call it DP from now on. And real fast, I call it a meta paradigm. We had the paradigm wars, this is one, this is one, this is, and all these argue, this is right, this is right, this is right, this is right. And we call that a purist stance. That's kind of a pure, it has to be this or not, or just leave it. Don't do it. Or it's this or nothing. And a meta paradigm tries to find particular pieces that can be from different paradigms or different anything, not just paradigms, that will be helpful to you to answer your research questions. So write your research questions. And research questions can be exploratory as well as hypotheses. It can be general and specific, because science needs to explore and learn as well as test. I've already mentioned that. So I'm just going to hear. Dialectical pluralism has an integration principle for each of these. And I'll say a little bit about those. I think I'm doing okay on time, actually. So DP, dialectical pluralism, listens to ontological pluralism. Do you want to read that, or do you want me to read it to you? I'll let you read it. And I'll say that when you look at the paradigm wars, this is where it's at. This is really what it boils down to. And so many arguments in religion, in philosophy, and everything you can think of, it kind of goes down to ontology. And here's the pluralist, the mixed principle, the dialectical pluralist principle that listen to these different and decide in science what can help you and what package, what combination can be useful for you. I like this quote by Willard Van Norman, by Quine. He's one of the greatest philosophers in philosophy and 20th century philosophy in the U.S. And a curious thing about the ontological problem is its simplicity. It can be put in 3 Anglo-Saxon syllables. What is there? It can, moreover, be answered in a word. Everything. Okay? And as I like to say, respect other kinds of realities, like disciplinary realities. What does biology have to say? What is geology? What is physics? What is psychology? What is sociology? All those things they're studying are interesting kinds of reality. And there's no need we have to reduce everything to our own. We do for particular advancement of science in that sense, and that's greatly important, but we should be open to what others might have to say too, have to add to that. And that's why the interdisciplinary research movement is so large in the world, where we're learning from each other and doing combinations. And then because the paradigm war is like, I'm right, you're wrong, I'm right, you're wrong, and so forth. I like to say, actually, it doesn't say there. What I say, there's enough reality to go around for all of us. Okay? Let's get over ourselves. It really is a human tendency. I mean, all humans and all cultures have always thought theirs was the one. We're susceptible to this. So here's the I thought I had you read one principle. Did I do it again? There's the ontological principle. So basically, the ontological principle is going to say, listen to one. Here's some questions. Let's just go to some questions. I've already mentioned that to you. Try to answer these questions, and this is about ontology. What kinds of reality operate in your study? I mean, you really get, when you say, what do you want to look at? That is ontology. What reality do you want to examine? In a broad sense, in any research study, this is something you can do. What exactly do you want to look at? And that's where our biggest arguments go. And then, are there any explicit or implicit? Are they explicit or implicit in the paradigms you're using? What reality does your paradigm say you can look at? And mixed is that DP is going to say you can examine multiple kinds of reality. And I think in most research studies we do. We'll look at some objective things, we'll get at some subjective pieces of reality and some intersubjective. Intersubjective being like language, culture, rituals, ways of doing things that we experience, and subjective being more particular, more within ourselves, our experiences. Phenomenology, study people's experience of something. That's subjective and intersubjective, depending how far you want to take it, from pure to inner. And then objective, objective measures of things, more concrete measures. In most research studies, not most, but in many, I would think would probably often have some of all of those, if one thinks about it. Not always, certainly, but sometimes. So in your research study, in your research questions, what realities compete in your study? And you can overcome it by using a both and logic. Let's study both of them or all of them and bring it together. And when we bring it together, mixed methods research, we call them meta inferences. Meta inferences are inferences based on multiple pieces of information, multiple realities, multiple things we looked at, multiple languages. I'm glad you guys are here. So, and right here, what ontological objects or constructions do you want to study? This is when you're planning your research study. This is when you're designing your methods and what methodology and how you're going to get your participants. These are key ontological questions. And also in DP, there are a number of ontologies, right? And we're not going to say you have to only use social ontology. That's the only one. You can only use social ontology. You can find ideas in these things that might help you in your research study, or let's say grounded theory, in your application of that might be helpful to you, or an experiment. You might find some ideas, and that's what a meta paradigm does. It'll look for ideas and concepts that may be helpful for you to operate. There's the epistemological principle. It's basically going to say the same thing. What epistemologies, or what epistemology is about knowledge, and it's about what is knowledge, how do we know when we have knowledge, what kind of knowledge do we want to obtain, and all of these different fields and disciplines and subdisciplines, they have standards for knowledge. So this is a massive part of epistemology. When can you claim that you have knowledge? In some ways, that is the epistemological question. And then building on that, when can you claim? And what that means is, what is your justification? Do you consider the knowledge you're producing in your research justified? And as you're writing manuscripts to submit to journals, one of the key things they're going to look at is, did you answer your questions that you would say you were going to do? And is it justified? Not just did you do it, but is it justified? Is this justified knowledge? And in mixed methods research, we can use standards from lots of different areas, and in some ways that it's more broadly justified in a sense. And I have a term for that. It's called multiple validities legitimation. I don't have time to go into that, but it basically says look at the quantitative validities, the qualitative validities or trustworthiness, and then the mixed legitimation. My colleague Tony would say we call it legitimation. They wanted different words. So validity, trustworthiness, legitimation. It's all about justifying your research. Okay? Oh shoot. I did it again. No, I didn't. So we use epistemological pluralism. And that means listen very carefully and be very thoughtful. And use your brain and put together what you think is going to justify what you want. What kind of knowledge do you want? And how are you going to justify it? So epistemology is massive in all research. And here's some questions. So I think I just said this. But regarding that, what kind of data do you need to get that knowledge you want? Do you need interview data? Do you need quantitative data, statistical data, observational data, test data, and that goes on and on. What do you need for your research study? What kind of data do you need? Because this is all going to relate to your knowledge and its justification. And I just mentioned that's the standards thing. What standards are you going to use to justify your knowledge? And don't wait until after your research study is finished. Think about it before, okay? So at the end, you go, I created justified knowledge. And I've already mentioned the both the and logic, and I just mentioned that, okay? And values and ethics, okay? Dialectical pluralism, the way I've framed it, I will argue it should be based on humanistic values, and humanistic values go, very far back. And that's what I think should drive our world today is humanistic values, So it's just doing that automatically. So boom. Such as dignity, respect, honesty, empowerment, altruism, social justice, human rights. So there's the ethics here. If you want to say, well, that doesn't have any ethics. It does have ethics. And these are the ones that I'm promoting for this. So here's the principle there. And it's going to say, again, listen, dialogue with the values that are underlying what we want to do. I want to help children learn education. I want people to, I want their depressive episodes to decrease. These things we want. What values underlie? That's what I mean. What are the values underlying what you want to study? To make it concrete. That makes it a lot easier than state your values. And I said that for years. I never realized how to make it that concrete for people. So those are some questions you can ask in your research study. So what are the implicit? They're probably usually implicit. What are the implicit values? And dialectal pluralism is really needed when you're working with heterogeneous groups. Like your research team, it could be your thesis committee. It could be any of those. And a big thing in mixed methods research, how you balance the IMIC or insider's perspective, their understanding of the world, with the so-called ethic or objective outsider. And so I put objective outsider in quotation marks because there's no singular objective. God's eye view, which is what one philosopher called that. How do you honor local ways of knowing ethical principles? And then a big part of dialectical pluralism is it includes a number of social psychological strategies for dealing with differences. Okay? A lot of my training was in psychology, and my area, I love social psychology, but I like all the areas, but I love social work. And then methods. Methods is more concrete than methodology. Methodologies are bigger. Methods are smaller. Like, what methods of data collection do you want to use in your research study? Observation, interviews, tests, focus groups, constructed secondary data. Where are you going to get your data, and how will you get your data? That's methods. And so dialectical pluralism is gonna say rely on methods pluralism. And we want to answer this research question. We want to contribute to science in some ways. We want to contribute to local communities. So not just big science. We also want to contribute to local science. To understand, this is qualitative focus tends to be this particular school, this particular community, this take it all the way down if you want, this particular person, but that's getting kind of extreme. But still, we can include that. And history, by the way, it's a scientific approach. It studies the particulars. They know the particulars so well. They study it, and history is fascinating. But it's more focused on the particulars, although they'll start trying to add causation in there too. So the method's principally the same. And then I'm going to have to jump, I think, now. Okay, so there's some questions that you can try to answer. But what kind of methods are you thinking about for your design? And then there's between methods and within methods. Like a questionnaire, you can use you can gain qualitative and quantitative data with a questionnaire. Okay. But that's within method mixing. Between method mixing, say I want to do qualitative focused interviews, and I want to have a survey instrument, because that's between method. So you got two methods there that you're going to use in your mixed methods research study. So the methodology principle will be the same. Here's where I want to jump. Now I'm going to go to some of the strategies. Well, how can I do it? How can I try to make this happen? And what I've tried to do is to rely on what social psychology really has to say. And you see social psychology in so many different places. You see it in negotiation. You see it in group counseling. You see it in studying how humans operate, interact, symbolic interactionism, and so forth. You see it in legal areas. You see it in so many places. Okay, so all of these you've seen probably in different literatures. So this management is a big area that relies on these. Organizational design, organizational development, they all use these sorts of things. So here's how do you get people to work together? And at an individual level, you working as an individual can try this. Try to use some of these. Try to give attention to multiple authors' experiences and perspectives as you're learning about the world. Try to understand multiple sides of conflicting interests. Say that? It's magic. Uh-oh, what happened then? Okay, we're back. So there's more. Try to connect theory and practice in your thinking. Try to bring things together. There's that. And this is when we have more than one person, and every individual interacts with other people. It's kind of inevitable. But so try to generate a general and shared agreement and mission. What do we want to do in this research study? You're working with your colleague, working with your team, working with your thesis group if you want to. What's our mission and what do you want to do? Try to find some shared superordinate goals. What's the big thing we want? And if you start having problems at the deeper level, try to bring people back to the superordinate goal. Well, but this will help us with this larger goal, the superordinate goal. And try to find some, try to identify people that are different and open to productive dialogue and change. You have to try to work with people who are willing to be open-minded and try to be innovative and try to be inclusive and try to want to focus on what we can gain at that superordinate level. Because if you have people just absolutely stuck, there's really no answer to that. Just listen to them and find it interesting, but it will be difficult to work with. And so try to get a collaborative us-we perspective. And here's a number of more. Always try to find practice reflexivity and reciprocity. Give weight to everyone. Operate in a situation of equality. Your thoughts are equal to your thoughts. That are equal to my thoughts. And let's see what we can do. And if things are really breaking down, but I tried. Here's some more things. You can't reach agreement. You can try what's called a fractionalization strategy, which says this is where facilitators enable the disputants to reach agreement on smaller issues or parts of it, and that's progress if you can do that. And then you can sort of use a both and let's do lots of those rather than keep sticking at that one thing. And then the Harvard Negotiation Project over the past 30 years, they gave us 4. Separate the people from the problem, focus on interests, not problems. Invent options for mutual gain. So dialectical pluralism works on win-win strategies when it's focused on that. That's its focus. And try to obtain objective reality. So you're doing it, okay, what explain to me how you're getting that. And a lot of this is in that's my most recent chapter. Basically, almost everything in here is in that. And that's it for today, for now. We have 15 minutes? Or?
Yes, exactly. We have 10 minutes for discussion. So now is this part of our meeting when you have occasion to make some questions or comments. Please feel free.
And questions are required.
And required, yeah.
And we required a philology question, we require a psychology question, and so forth.
Thank you, Professor, for your very valuable and informative presentation. I want to ask one thing that for data collection, we use survey and you say FGD if we within or mixed method, like some parts for survey and for FGD. This is just a question for what is your preference? What is your personal preference? Because you are very expert in mixed method. If we use FGD or case study, which is more accepted?
You said case study or what?
A case study of a thing or just FGD. We are focusing on an objective to answer the research question. I am using FGD of several groups, 4 or 5 groups. That is more authentic or credible, or if I go for case study, that is more authentic or credible?
Well, authenticity will be, there are different ways to get at authenticity, right? So that's a nice research goal for your study. And I think in most qualitative research, this is where we want. This is a way to get it. There's a lot more authenticity in an interview than in answering a 5-point Likert scale. Okay, so there's more. But the mixed methods perspective and the DP, dialectical pluralism, is going to say that, yes, but probably you also want to get some additional kinds of indicators of what you're looking at. And that will often make your study more useful in some ways, more informative. And because one of the big things in like, for example, analysis is the results you get from these different approaches, they may or may not agree, okay? And if you exist in one approach and you think that's the truth, but if you would have used a different approach and that showed something different, and there are many ways why things can be different. That's one reason I like to operate in more than one approach. Because if I spent my life living like a fish in the water in just a tank, in the house, that's all I have. And I'd rather jump to some of the other tanks and in corn, get out of the silos and to see some more understanding as I grow through life. That's the perspective.
Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. It was very interesting for me as a sociologist. I have a question concerning probably the values, most of all, because you mentioned them on one of the slides, but they're also present on some other ones, explicitly or not. And you mentioned empathy and respect and creativity, maybe, and some kind of openness, I would say. And I'm curious whether you have, or whether you like to share some suggestions or reflections on how to develop this kind of openness. I'm asking both as a young researcher, but also as a young teacher who would like to maybe develop those in the students as well.
Okay. There's a one-word answer. Listen. There's a 2-word answer. Listen with empathy. Listen for understanding. And humans have this tendency toward ethnocentrism and egocentrism. We know us, we know our culture, but we have to find ways to get into these other cultures and into these other places, into these other individuals, into these other places, their subjective intersectional world. We have to find ways to get into there. So, and there's a tendency for us not to be able to do that. So the point is, it takes a lot of training. You know, do interviews, practice interviewing, and whenever you write it, say you develop a questionnaire, it'll sound great to you, right? But that doesn't matter. It matters, but it has to work for them. So when you construct that instrument, you have to have you have to say, how are they going to see it? And that's how we can make sure, at least try to understand their perspectives and what is meaningful to them. And this is where I like to bring language in. You know, we're turning an English instrument into a Polish instrument now, but translating a questionnaire from one language to the other takes a lot of work, because different words can mean very different things in different cultures or different languages, right? And different symbols can mean very different things in different places. So in that translational process, and why are we doing that translational process? We're doing it because we want to try to obtain authentic, in a sense, information. Sorry, I'm supposed to talk to you there. Does that help some? You can follow up if you want.
Thank you for presentation. And in the light of this presentation, I wonder, is it necessary to still using a concept of paradigm? Because we are.
I don't think so. No.
Yeah, we are closed in the box
Yes,
of this concept.
it's a silo.
Yeah, you agree with me?
Yes, but I'll elaborate.
Yeah.
Science, social science, and natural science, more social science, it needed a readjustment. You know, this is why the qualitative movement came into play. And it also came to play in philosophy and more continental philosophy than Anglo-British philosophy, of different ways of understanding the world. So it needed a readjustment. And the mixed perspective is saying we like both of those. We don't just one, we think that's fine, okay, it's good, and we can learn from it. Never would I say that. But we also want a good bit of research where we can bring those things together and learn about more than living in one silo. And I think that mixed research was inevitable for science, because it had this approach for all this time, and now it got a nice adjustment in using Kuhn's paradigm argument. You know, it was time. We found some anomalies. It's being challenged, and this is bringing both perspectives in. It's kind of a new synthesis, but it was inevitable. So my answer to your question is we're just getting back to what I think good research is to what do we want to know? What are our questions? How can we best answer them?
Thank you, Professor, for a very inspiring talk. And I would like to build my question on what was asked previously from the perspective of a student and a young researcher. What would be your most important advice for those who would start or would think of studying mixed method research? Just a basic one, maybe 1 point or 2. You said already that ignore paradigms, so I
like paradigms. I wrote an article of paradigms, and I said in that article, I'll send you the reference if you want. I think paradigms are needed. I think they're useful, but I want to learn from more than one. That's all. So, and the reason I sort of said that, I've never really said that before, but I think we want to focus on answering our questions. You know, what do the students and the professor want to understand? And I think they will generally find something useful, something small and useful in different paradigms. That's kind of the pluralist perspective. And don't be afraid of that. I think humans have a little bit of a tendency to, this is the way, you know, and we certainly see this in religion. No, this is the way. This is the truth, you know, and no, this one is the way. And there's a little bit of human tendency to want the answer, and answers are usually more complex. This is a beautiful place that qualitative research can add to, and grounded theory, to quantitative science. It'll show some complexities. Reality is complex. That's just how it is. And quantitative methods have traditionally focused on means, correlations, averages, or aggregate kinds of statistics. And qualitative has helped us to understand and get a view down into the world where things are more complex. And mixed methods is interested in bringing those together, saying both of these are important to give a more holistic understanding.
Thank you.
So I was wondering how not to struggle too much during my career, because you said before that we should focus on different perspectives, that there are, I call them equal. It's talked to a lot on
That's in the group
of-
process, yes.
Yeah, and you know, because I'm on just on beginning of my research road, I would say, and I wonder like how to verify which of perspectives are really valuable, how not to waste my time, because
Yes, that's very important.
Yeah.
We can't do everything, right? We can't read everything. One way to become you might have to bring me back here, but one way to become a good mixed researcher is that if qualitative research is your primary expertise, go read some quantitative methodology, philosophy, and try to learn about that. And if quantitative research is your primary expertise, make sure you go study qualitative research. In some ways, we need that to operate with a mixed perspective. So understanding of the other, equal or whatever, we need to, your question was about that too, how can we understand it? It's going to be hard to mix if we don't understand these different perspectives. So it takes work, it takes getting outside of our comfort zone a little bit, but I don't really like that. But often when we take like something new, we'll find, wow, I'm glad I learned that. My son took a class on animal behavior, not non-human, but other animal behavior in his psychology program. It was just a really cool thing that he took, and it's having an impact on him. It's just another thing that I got a lot of psychology doctoral students in my qualitative and mixed class, and they were socialized into the quantitative way of thinking, which is very much on hypothesis testing. And they come over into that class and they learn they learn an additional way. And then you can operate to bring things together. I don't think I answered your question directly, but you want to reach
yeah,
out?
I was wondering about different, I don't know, maybe parts of science, parts of human career. You said before that we can focus more on the, for example, geological view, or maybe ethological view, or another. And I was wondering, like, during my career, how to, I don't know, do you maybe have your own strategies when during your career you wonder,
Yeah.
okay, so now should I wonder more on the anatomy or more on the psychological part?
Yes.
And like, what may be the may have the biggest impact during my research?
Okay. I believe and I think the mixed perspective says this. We can view it as an analogy to your literature review. You know, you're saying, what should I look at? I can't look at everything, right? Use in your literature review, use multiple search terms. Never, in my opinion, use a singular database. I'm just going to use one database in my search. Well, you've already cut off everything else. So when I use EBSCO, I click all. You know, it has multiple kinds of databases in it. And if they've talked about something I'm interested in, it includes philosophy and history and everything else, it'll pop up. So in a sense, you can operate like a literature reviewer, and you can see what different literatures and theories and professors and so forth have to say about what you are interested in. And that'll help you to, and then you just have to, you know, use your brain and just say, yes, I think this is important for me. That's interesting, but it's not relevant for what I want to do.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much. The last question, because of time. And we, of course, we will have occasion to make another questions in the second part.
Thank you. I hope I won't take too long. I'm actually asking about how to publish right now. Your talk actually inspired me into thinking slightly different, because we're doing research where we have qualitative and quantitative data. And of course, they answer slightly different questions, but related to one topic. And our idea was to publish qualitative data separately and quantitative separately. So what will be your view, how to sell it to the reviewers as well, in terms of publishing it in one article, for example?
As a general statement, I prefer to see it published in one article. But that's not necessary. You know, you can publish in different places. One thing Journal of Mixed Methods Research does, and that's kind of the leading journal in our field, and there's another journal called International Journal of Multiple Research Approaches. They're looking for articles, okay? International Journal of Multiple Research Approaches. Literatures are like sort of like paradigms. They're slow to change. You know, it takes time. Journals are like this. It takes them time. You know, in one sense of thinking about Thomas Kuhn's paradigm stuff, you have to wait till they all die, right? But no, we're not going to wait, right? So what we see in history is these things will slowly start coming in, and you can often get mixed in there. You might make it sound it's a more quantitative, make it sound a little more quantitative to be acceptable. But never violate your ethics, you know, and your honesty. Never do that. But you can play around a little bit so that it'll be acceptable, and then they'll see it, and then it'll start getting cited. And so I think most journals are becoming, most journals that I know of are open to mix now. Some journals don't like the word mix. They want you to call it qualitative and quantitative. You know, psychology in the United States seems a little bit like that. But mixed methods is becoming very acceptable in psychology. Psychology in the United States is very quantitative, just to let you know. So you have to understand and work it in and frame it. How are you going to frame it? Because we can reframe the same thing, and it's still, the stuff is there, but you can adjust the framing, and then you can find journals, because it depends on the editors at what point. Right now, this editor, what do you think his or her research co-editors are open to? And I think a lot of journals now, we're seeing they have qualitative and quantitative people on the editorial board. So this is changing, and the change is you guys do it. You can do it, but you know, nothing is simple. But you just have to frame it and do what you have to do. And when When they criticize it, try to give, and this is coming back to epistemology now, justify it. Just justify it. Because if you give justifications, validity and trustworthy, if you give that, it's going to be hard to reject. If you're providing justified knowledge, it will not be easy for them to reject.
So thank you so much. We invite you to the short break, and after this we will continue the second part. Please remember, we will start according to the schedule, so 5 minutes before 11:30.
Very interesting. Thank you very much. Sorry, Eleonora Baturovich, I'm a professor of psychology here. I will not be able to be on the second part because we have a lecture to deliver. So
Yeah.
Sorry.
My wife is experimental psychologist.
Oh, so I send my best regards.
Yes.
Hope you see you.
Nice to meet you.
We have.
Yeah. Your colleagues asked a lot of questions.
Yes, I have great colleagues with great questions.
Her colleagues, you're inquisitive, aren't you?
They are my colleagues from my School of Social Sciences.
You said sociology.
Yes.
Yes.
Are you studying sociology?
Yes.
Good. Me too. I love sociology. I've got a degree in sociology.
Oh, okay.
And psychology.
Yes,
You're
we are
in
the
economics.
economics.
And I love economics, brother. Economics.
So in different disciplines, but the same area.
Yeah, at the same year.
Yeah, they all touch on stuff in slightly different ways. You know? So it's kind of so it's like macro, micro, and in a sense, mixed methods is in between. Meso level of yeah.
Yes, Professor. Because this workshop is very valuable for us because this is our third year, this study, the doctoral journey, third year.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Okay. Good.
You were preparing our thesis, so like combining survey data and LCD
Yeah.
is very important. Like
Because in the beginning, you're learning all these particulars. This
compiling.
exactly.
So it's very important. Because now the time for writing. So showing something that I have thesis. So it's
Yeah.
very important.
And try to write a little bit all the way along. Keep track of your.
Oh yeah. That's what I learned early on. That's right.
In grounded theory, they call it memoing. Memo. Write yourself theoretical memos as you think about.
Professor, I have just one question.
Yeah.
Fractionalization
Yeah.
strategy. I'm just a new term for me. Can you explain in example what is fractionalization?
Excuse me, coffee, tea, or orange juice?
Well, if you're in a group and let's say you're trying to decide how to improve some kind of operation in an organization, and one group is going to say, I think we need training. And they say, well, we need training, but we also need some better management strategies. We need some organizational goals. We need changes where the supervisors listen to us more. Now, if one person, say you're trying to get to the big goal, and one says training, and the other says something else, then we say, well, so you're going to be the big higher brain here. You say, well, training might be very important, and I think it's probably going to need some of that. My thinking is, but I'm just one person here. But Cleveland made a good suggestion here that we need some better support and management strategies, cultural change. And then you say, and So then you can say, well, like you're the cultural person. Do you agree that maybe we can agree that some training might be needed? And then the other people, you can try to get them to agree on is maybe we need some supervision approaches to change as well. So there we're breaking it up some little pieces where we can agree. That's my understanding.
Yes.
And I don't see a lot of discussion of fractionalization in the literature. I learned it from an organizational development professor at University of Arizona.
Yes.
And that was coming out of the management literature, which is kind of an interdisciplinary, includes economics too.
Yes, so that's the, and Professor, I mailed you of your online workshop that the dictionary you made PROF.
Oh yeah. Void.
Yes, that is very good research because I saw your name in that book. You replied in my email that you are not like.
Oh, have you emailed me?
Yes, I
good.
emailed you, and in the just to workshop in the team that workshop after that workshop I mailed you. The dictionary is very helpful.
Good.
Actually because
Good.
that is the like terminology. From that you can go in deeper. Like you want to use some logistic regression or something like that.
Right.
So from that term you can dig down that how I can apply in my research, in my questionnaire, in my survey, in my so on and so on.
Yeah.
So that's it. I go to my library in our university library and I take the books and I always keep this.
Good.
It's very
if there's something you're interested in, I might have something that I can just send you to.
yes. Yes, I will be very thankful if you have any copy. Then
yeah. If I don't answer your email,
yes, I have.
Wait a while and send it again.
Yes.
Okay, because
now I am also sending that. Yes, that books is very resourceful, Professor. Actually, that books is very resourceful for a social scientist because
I might be able to send you the whole book.
All the terms are in here. I love this because alphabetically you need like chi-square test or like t-test.
Yeah, it has a lot of stuff.
Yes, and you have explained in a very good shape. So I like this book actually, and it's great resource.
Yeah, they don't want to revise it because they say people get all their information over the internet now. That's why we have revised it.
Yes,
but it goes way back.
Yes, internet is if you do not have internet, then I always believe in this because you say that alternate. You have all the sources, not one source.
Right.
So
That's it. Is my linguistic crew going to come back? I hope they do. They didn't answer any questions, ask any questions. Did you send me an email?
I'm just finding just one thing. That send function data. Because I'm going outside because in this room internet is not working well.
With some of the history of I have
I make a dot between this.
Yeah, I haven't gotten any new emails recently. Yeah.
Yes, and now I am again.
What is your name?
Alam.
Alam. Are you from?
No. I'm from Bangladesh.
Bangladesh. Did you send me an email from Bangladesh? Or was it here?
No. I just mail.
Oh, this will be your first? Yeah.
Yes.
I had some really we had some wonderful people from Bangladesh in our doctorate program.
Yes, because in your country, a lot of university, all people doing Ileana, Champagne, and
yeah, we had a few at our university. University of South Alabama.
Yes, South Alabama. I have some.
University of Virginia had a brother. Her brother got his PhD in economics at University of Virginia.
A lot of people goes to your country. Lot of them. Because they It was great. Actually, when I joined your team meeting, I was waiting for when we'll meet each other in the
Were you at the lecture last time? Were you
In the
present?
team, yeah, I attended your team meeting.
Yeah. So you were
And
there.
you have a flu at that time.
Yeah. So, you're getting some redundancy now.
Yes, and 19 February. It is on February 19, 2020.
Very good,
Yes,
very
I know.
That's good. I'm glad. Because you have to hear things multiple times.
No tak, to jest zdarzona okazja, bo w Polsce były 4,
I have listened to me.
Okay, thank you.
więc może mieć okazję.
Sławek, gotcha.
O której zaczynamy?
Thank you. So it will be great if I get the.
Yeah.
Thank you.
If I don't reply,
Yes.
then yeah,
Yes,
wait a few days.
because I like this book very much. So I will try to
I can-
remind you again.
I'll send you. Okay. Because they're not going to read
Yes,
copies.
yes. So, it will be great,
So you
and
have
then
the whole book.
Yes, and I can print from here and take it in my desk and in my file.
Yes. Yeah, you can't share it.
Professor, it will be.
But
you
if
can,
you want to share, you have to ask me.
no, Professor, it will be my.
Because I'm not allowed.
It's a gift. It's
Okay,
a gift.
okay.
It's a gift. That's all.
Very perfect.
Yes,
Very
thank you.
perfect.
Thank you.
So, the participants of today's seminar, it's time to start the second part of our meeting. So, let's go.
Okay, I'm going to do as much as I can on this part because it's a very limited time. And I also want to do what is interesting to you and helpful and have time for questions, okay? Because I hope those questions help because sometimes questions where we pull things together, rather, I know that, but wonder about that. So you pull some ideas and get some aha experiences from a Gestalt psychologist out of Germany. So I'm going to talk a little bit about, in this presentation, probably mostly about methodologies, and I'm going to touch a little bit on causation. I'm not going to be able to get into this, but I'll happily do I'll do a presentation or workshop or whatever you want to call it. I can do it virtually if you guys want me to. But you're going to have a lot of the pieces here from what I'm doing now. So, as I said, let's talk a little bit about methodologies. And already mentioned methodologies are bigger than methods. Methods are sampling methods, methods of data collection, data analysis methods. I think someone mentioned logistic regression or something. These are all methods, and these are particular things that we use in gathering our data and analyzing and deciding who to study. Methodologies are kind of bigger packages of stuff. Honestly, I wish we would have called mixed methods research mixed methodology. But there's political reasons, there are power players, there's chance that kind of all came together, and that's how it became named mixed methods research. So this is I like to do a quick review. So in quantitative research, what are some of quantitative research's big methodologies? Well, the biggest, I don't know if the biggest, I will not say the biggest, but experimental research is very, very big in the United States and in the history of psychology. Psychologists, right? Wundt, right? A lot in German, including a lot of psychology coming out of there. So, experimental research is massive, but I like to break it down into 3 different kinds. We've got, and this kind of goes back to Donald Campbell, one of our greatest research methodologists of the 20th century. Where we have weak, quasi, and strong. So strong experimental research is like randomized designs. We give randomized designs to the different groups, so you can basically equate the groups. Over the long term, the groups will be equal. There'll be no differences. So if you introduce one change, then we contribute that as the cause. There are weak designs, though, such as the pre-test, post-test, but that design, we still have something to compare to. We can compare to the pre-test. So that design is not as weak as it's sometimes said to be in American experimental psychology, because in real life, it's not that awful. But when you add additional information, it's always about how much evidence do you have? It's not, did this one thing give you everything you need? We can improve things. So I just brought that to be an example. And then, single case designs, A-B designs. There are a number of multiple baseline designs that tend to use on single people. And then non-experimental, there's a massive amount of non-experimental, and all that means is they didn't actually manipulate something in the world. They didn't go into the world, change something, and then look to see what happened. But they're studying the world with variables. So the key idea of quantitative research, except for a single case, is it's about variables. It's the language of variables. We're studying how variables are interrelated. That's quantitative research. And okay, my point's going to come up in a second. And then in qualitative, there are more. These are the 5 big ones that I tend to talk about to give a nice package. Narrative inquiry, discourse analysis has a good bit in common with that. This is where we listen to people's stories. And I was talking to my brother last night about ethnography. There's some stuff little overlapping going on right there too. Case study research, phenomenology. What is the meaning, structure, and essence of this lived experience? And that's where we want to go. We want to know that experience. Ethnography, I love ethnography. Sociology, we love ethnography. Sociology certainly does. It's a wonderful methodology. And by the way, ethnography is never been totally qualitative. It's mixed, really. It's just how we label these things. That's what's happening. And then grounded theory. This is one of my favorite because for me, grounded theory is it's an outstanding philosophy of science. I'm just going to put it right like that. I think it's a good philosophy of science. I want to discover and learn, but I also want to be testing and getting more confidence in what I'm understanding. So it's kind of like that research wheel I mentioned to you. It's massive, the way I think about the world. And then the title of this presentation is innovative, right? So I call dialectic deployed. I think that's an innovative philosophy of science. I think mixing methodologies is innovative. How many of you heard someone say, I'm going to mix my methodologies? Because, we've got all these single books and articles saying this is how this one is done. So I think you've learned that trying to bring things together to be innovative and to find new ways of understanding our world and so forth. That's what I think mixed methods can help us with. And this is the simplest way is to add something qualitative to a traditional quantitative methodology. Or add something quantitative to a traditional qualitative methodology. Now you can call it mixed. It's really that simple. Is that some massive world-changing event that lightning's going to strike once we do that? We're just trying to add a little bit something to it to help us to get at our research questions a little bit better. That's not earth-shattering. So the idea is, what's your methodology that you're most comfortable with? Extend it a bit. That's what I'm arguing. And I'm also arguing I think we're going to see more and more of this in future history. This will keep happening. And in some ways, it's like thesis, antithesis, and synthesis. This concept goes on all the way through time. So I just said that, you guys. So that was, again, that's the key point. Okay, there's your key point. There's, if you, I'm going to talk a little more about mixed methods grounded theory right now, but there's a lot of mixing going on in experimental research, even experimental. Yes, the method, the foundational method of psychology, the science. This is happening, and it's good, and it's becoming more and more commonplace. And there's many. If you want to read that article, you see so many things that qualitative can do, and not just. It's kind of a side to it. It can be before you conduct the experiment. It can be after qualitative, bring there to help understand and answer some questions that might have come up for you. And some can occur at the same time. Kind of a side thing going on. So I've already said this. Add something quantitative. Any of these qualitative. One example would be mixed methods experiments, or I could call them MM-EXP, mixed method experiment. So whatever you'd like to do, just make a mixed methods version of it. Intellectually, it's that simple because that's the point. Now, practically, now you have to make it become concrete, and you have to make it happen in your study and your research. But I will argue that I think you will often see that you're getting more views and understandings about what you are interested in studying. And there's been articles, I have some colleagues that have done this, and in ethnography, one of the giants, Pelto, he goes back to the 1930s, I think. He said, this mixed method stuff, we've always been doing this. What are you people talking about, And I appreciated that. It's true. It's just people want to frame it and say, no. You have to do it like this. And ethnography's always been, they never had an aversion to counting something. A number's not inherently evil. And in terms of narrative, take a theme. If a theme, one thing we like to look at in quality is themes. What are the common things that we're hearing said a lot? Well, if I say, was that a real common one? Did most people say that? Was it more common? Okay, that's quantitative. Doesn't more mean more? 2 is more than 1. 50% is more than 25%. So a lot of these things are inherently mixed. Our language is mixed. As soon as we say more, this is for you guys. We're implying something that is more than the other, which is a quantitative kind of statement. And whenever we talk about categories and any concept, that's qualitative. So language is inherently, and I think science is inherently mixed. And us humans are the ones that broke it apart. And we're trying to put it back together, or we're not trying to put it, we're trying to enable, we're trying to argue, try to keep putting it back together at times. Nothing I say is ever always, except that statement. No always, except no always. Okay, so let's look at let's do a little mixed methods grounded theory now. Keep me posted on the time, okay? So this is what I'm arguing here. And I'm arguing for a science, I'm arguing for an open science, a science that is open to new ways of doing things. And I believe in the bottom of my heart that that's how we try to gain knowledge, you know? I mean, if we have something we know is the best and perfect and the only, we'll certainly use it a lot, but still don't ever always be open to something else, maybe. But a literature, you know, it's just a way of thinking. Empirical research knows that it never finds final truth. Capital T truth, the truth. We know a lot of places that claim they have that, right? But empirical research, because Bertrand Russell he talked about chickens going down and eating. The farmer comes out in the morning every day at 6 a.m., throws the feed out, and the chickens going. And then, you know, their entire life, the farmer dies, and the next day they come out there. You know how chickens do, right? That's their movements. Things can change. That's an empirical reality. We're open to that. Things can happen, and that's what David Hume called the inductive fallacy. That things can be different, and that's empirical science. And that's how it's different from traditional Western philosophy, from Socrates, Plato, to the present, and analytic philosophy in the past 100 years. That's what it's been its focus. And the use of deductive logic. So basically, I like inductive logic very, very much. And I think it's really important to what we do and to obtain probabilistic understanding of things that are likely, things that are more likely, less likely, and so forth. So in mixed methods rounds, I'm going to talk about one design that we constructed. I worked with a student on her dissertation that was at a different university, and she did a beautiful thesis. We call it dissertation, the doctoral. You call it thesis here? Yeah. So involved theory generation and testing, open-endedness and structure. So I'm just emphasizing the ends. Sorry to get over dramatic there. Qualitative and quantitative data. So I'll show you maybe I'll just go ahead and go forward. This is the design of the study. And there are two articles on this. One was published in one study, Minjung Shim published the article in her empirical literature. And let's see if I can find I'm not going to go that far. We'll see it in a minute. So she, you know, the different studies. This is a good example of someone asked about, should you publish separately, you know, two different journals? Well, here's what the strategy she used, which is the one that I like, I think. There are different ones, but this is the one I like. She published her empirical study and results in a traditional journal in her field. And then she published a methodological article in the leading journal in the field of mixed methods research. That wouldn't have to be there, to be other places too, but that's what she did. So she had the empirical one, and then we did a methodological one to explain the methodology involved in the study. So she got 2 publications out of that. In my own dissertation or thesis, I got 2 articles out of mine, because in my literature review, I did kind of a new kind of literature review, and I'll call it a grounded theory literature review, because I constructed what I call a formative model from the literature. That is, I use grounded theory logic to go out and see what these different things were saying from a theory perspective. How did they explain the operation of something? And there were explicit theories about it. Mine was on use of evaluation utilization. So Michael Patton, he had a theory called use-focused evaluation. Okay, so he had a theory. Other people talk about, and we consider them theories, but they didn't have a specifically model. So I was actually looking for model, the explicit model. Most of them were explicit, so I made the implicit models explicit. I constructed, I tried to put it into a picture. What model were they really saying there? And I put those things together, and I call that meta modeling. That's what I did in my dissertation. And I argued that that can be thought of as a grounded theory logic or philosophy. So what we're going to see in here is this is what she did in her in phase one. She studied the literature and she found the models that show how the process of dance therapy, it's a movement therapy, can help people living with chronic pain. So chronic pain is a serious problem for millions and millions of people. And her study was about, it's called dance movement theory, something like that. You'll see in a minute. I'm breaking down a little bit here. So it's good to have additional approaches to deal with pain management, let's say. So if you look at the article actually either one, you'll see she drew models from articles and books in the literature. So this works like this, and this, and this. It's going through this process. And she also, in phase one, conducted a traditional grounded theory. So I think she had 18 participants. So it was interviews and observations, and she worked with them over a 6-week, I think it was 6-week period. And she made theoretical notes. She transcribed the interviews and then looked for patterns and what's happening and process coding is a really interesting kind of coding. Johnny Saldana, I think, is one of his book on coding, I think was just a huge addition to the field, because he talks about so many additional kinds of coding, qualitative, i.e. narrative or pictorial data. And one of his is process code. When you look at the interviews, do you see a process happening in there? Because grounded theory is kind of interested in that. How does something operate? Grounded theory is extremely conceptual. What are the concepts? But it's also about how do these concepts operate as a process so that we can obtain an understanding of what we're trying to understand. So theory, for me and all my students, I tell them, don't be afraid by that word, theory. Theory. Oh my God, not theory, please. No theory. Theory just means explanation. You do explanation every day of the week. You're having a beer or wine with someone or water or whatever it might be, and you talk about and you explain how you think something works. That's theory. So theory can be macro, it can be micro. We could have a theory about today, right here and now. We have explanation about what's happening today. So don't let that. In the US, psychology got very scared of that word theory, and they kind of just went back to just empirical findings and meta-analysis, because they became afraid about big theories like developmental psychology. And that's the reason grounded theory came about in sociology, because they had these big theories. Functionalism, conflict theory, symbolic interactionism, and they found you can't fit everything into one of those. You shouldn't operate just in one. Grounded theory says, let's study this phenomenon and see what theory or explanation of it is useful for science. That's how, this is really my philosophy of science. That's a massive part of it, is to understand and to explain how something works. So that was her phase one, including these two components. So she literally developed a pictorial model. So what we like to do in grounded mixed methods is you develop when I talk about grounded theory, I personally ask my readers to develop a picture model, a model where you can see how things work. I'm very visual, so that helps me tremendously. I think it helps the writer. It forces them to put their ideas together in another way, because they might see, maybe I missed something out on there. I was thinking that this happened before this, or this happened before this, but not exactly in terms of the process. So I think it's helpful. And in addition to that, I think every grounded theory should have a description, a narrative description of that model. So one of my arguments in grounded theory is, if you're going to do grounded theory, then produce a grounded theory. Because in a lot of cases, if someone uses some pieces of grounded theory, I used axial coding, I used constant comparative analysis and so forth. So that makes it grounded theory. But for me, I'd like to see a grounded theory in with a theory. That's my personal perspective. It's the one I write about, the one I promote. And there's lots of different kinds of grounded theories, as we know. So we had a model there. We had a grounded theory model there. Then we combined them. I call that, went back to my dissertation. We call that a meta model. I just had two models and I put them together. It's a meta model. What do we want to call it? It's combined the two. And we call that a formative model, the one based in the literature. Think about when you read the literature. I like to see the literature review end with something more substantial than the end. You go through all the stuff. So this idea of a formative model says, how do you bring that literature together? What is that? What model is implicit into that as you go into your study? And it helps one to make it more explicit. What theory? It's a theory of what right now for your particular study is kind of driving you. It helps us to understand where your study's operating from. So I call that a formative theory. But it's really based on grounded theory logic. In my opinion, I connect a lot of things in my brain, maybe not the right way sometimes, but I see that as a connection. So we had a meta model there. And then in the second phase, we wanted to test it. So this is the exploratory phase. And we in grounded theory, traditional grounded theory right there, we say it's exploratory. It's focused on discovery, and we're going to discover what's operating with regard to this. Oh, good, got plenty of time. We want to discover what's operating and what explains it and what process is happening there. And you can do this with language too. Anything you want to understand, we can try to make explicit. We can study where things are happening and try to see what's happening, such as how do people learn language? We can study that everywhere in the world, right? And one interesting thing there is, and this applies to grounded theory, is a grounded theory that you develop it was discovery and exploratory, but that theory itself, to some degree, very well might generalize or apply to some other places. And that's where grounded theory, I think, is really helpful to science, to understand the particular here. But it can also sometimes generalize to multiple concepts. In sociology, there was a famous book called Street Corner Society. And I think it was done in the 1950s, and it went into the culture of about 15 people that hung out on a corner in New York City. And it studied why they were there, what was important to them. It's kind of like a little ethnography in there. What was their culture? What was important to them? What changes in the world were big to them, and so forth. And like with language, for example, if we're studying language, not just language acquisition, but maybe something, but that too, but something more in the adult life of how we operate. Something studied in Poland, the theory part, some of the theory part might apply in Bangladesh, and so forth. And in ethnographies, and ethnography on, say, children developing in schools, early development in, say, elementary schools. We'll study school. We'll study someone else studies the school. Someone else studies the school. All of those are good. All of those are interesting. But we might also start seeing some theoretical commonalities across those. And then we've moved up to slightly higher level within science of finding some more generalizable theoretical, that is, explanatory understandings. And that's what we were playing with ethnography a little bit yesterday. You know, we could, I don't know how many people in the world are anymore. I think it's around 7 billion. It might be 8, I don't remember. But if all we did were autoethnographies, we'd have 8 billion studies. But when we can start putting these together, we can get some really cool understandings. And that's what we were chatting about. And I think autoethnography also can be a really cool data collection method. If we can get our participants, say in a qualitative study, to think about their contextual and cultural influences, or where they are and how it might have impacted them and their thinking and what they came to, we get some good knowledge there, I think. So there's that. I can't think of anything else to say, sorry. So we had this model, and then we decided we wanted to test it some. We called it an exploratory confirmatory design. I begged John Cresswell to include this in his designs. He's the one that has told the world what 3 designs to use. And I think there are a number of problems with them. They're good, but they're much more that researchers can do. I couldn't get him to add that to his, but anyway. In a study, we can do some exploration and some confirmation. So we've got basically 2 grounded theory. That's a grounded formative model. That's a traditional grounded theory, done the appropriate way, for the purists. That is, you have to do it like this. And we respect that very much. And she did it right in there with 19 participants. And then we put those together. We're going to do modeling all the way through this thing. So we put that together, and she identified a number of things she could measure quantitatively. And she had a pre-test, intervention, post-test designs. So she had a quantitative, it was a type of experimental research design. So we could study through comparisons of before and after and change, what occurred. But interestingly, that was actually a mixed methods experiment because she collected the quantitative data, but she also collected qualitative data in that same experiment. So remember I just mentioned we could have mixed methods experimental research too. So she really conducted, was just a pure quantitative experiment. And then she developed a model out of that. Maybe I'm hitting this slide. She developed a model out of that, and she tested a number of the things that were in this model. And some things were statistically significant, and some things weren't. And we got some additional things that qualitative was showing us. And I'm going to show you just a little bit of that in a second. And then in phase 3, we have a final. Nothing's ever final, remember, in grounded theory, in science, nothing's ever totally final, but we had a very nice theoretical understanding of this process of dance movement therapy for pain management. She gained a very nice understanding of it. I'm on time now, 10? Okay.
And more, even.
And my argument is, I think that's a better grounded theory. My personal bias. Science is my big goal. I think that, and maybe I shouldn't use words better. I think that's a strong grounded theory. Okay? It's not necessarily better. Because lots of grounded theories are also wonderful. Every single one is wonderful. But I think this is a very strong design because it included discovery, exploration, and testing in the same study. And it didn't take forever. It didn't take 10 years. It took her about 10 weeks, somewhere around there. So yes, it's possible, because one of the arguments against it says, we can't do all that. You can't do it. You just can't do it. But it took her less time than one might think. And it requires you to think all the way through conducting the study, through memos and theoretical memos and theoretical sampling. You start with open coding, and then you start getting toward developing an understanding and a big theme in there. And then you start theoretically sampling what cases do I need to look at now to help me to fill out my theoretical explanation better. And you bring those kinds of data in there to work towards your model, your grounded theory. So I think we use that logic all the way through this study, personally. That's what I believe. That's beautiful, but I think this is also beautiful. That's kind of what I'm on here. I think that's also beautiful too. So let me go back one. I just put that in the article. We put it in the article. Then we think some strengths are, and how many times have I said this, you guys? I mean, the wheel of science is just so stuck in my head. By the way, abductive is big too. But the wheel of science is kind of a inductive, deductive, inductive, deductive, inductive. And those words are defined in lots of different ways, but it's kind of the explore, test. And we do that throughout a regular grounded theory too, but there's not a lot of discussion about it. And that's where they're bringing this idea of abduction. You start sort of testing things out in your traditional grounded theory to help you to get more confidence in it. And one can have inductive hypotheses. That is a thought, well, I wonder if this is going on here. I'm doing my qualitative interview, I think. I call that an inductive hypothesis as you're doing the grounded theory. And you can sort of check those out. During a traditional qualitative, the brain works that way. It's just the brain kind of operates like that. And so we're already sort of doing this. So we can maximize the strengths. Systematic combines the major strength purpose of qualitative induction construction, with the major strength of quantitative research, empirically testing theoretical relationships to produce a more informative and, I won't say more, but highly justified synthesized whole. That's the idea of this particular methodology called mixed methods grounded theory. So we're going to generate and test the theory, good social behavioral science, etc. Requires systematic theory development as well as independent testing, verification, justification, and I argue it builds a stronger model. Honestly, I had to change the title of this article to satisfy the reviewers. Every time I said it was stronger, they were saying, well. But I truly believe it. I think it's stronger than remember I had the formative model, the grounded theory model, and the testing part. I think all those things we surrounded it by made it stronger. And I believe that 100%. But I had to change the title. And I was so tired at that point. It took a year and a half to get this article published, to get through what I was going through with these reviewers. But anyway, so that's we'll call that the design. That's the design itself. And now we'll look at it a little bit more. This is the final model. And I know that's a whole lot to look at, but I want you to get the article and you can take a peek at it. This is the final theoretical model. She had an interesting one from the literature. She had an interesting formative model. She had an interesting grounded theory model. And she had interesting additions during the mixed method experiment. And then at the end, she put them all together. And interestingly, those models are not radically different, which adds more trust to me from a science perspective. Thank you. You know, when we start seeing things replicating and so forth, that's often a good thing, but not always. Remember, no always. You know, if we can be predicted everything we do every moment of our life, what kind of life is that? I don't want to go there, but you know, we're talking deep future here. So this is her model, and it kind of involved, it's a new thing, and then they start mobilizing with things, people working with them, and they loosen up, and they learn ways of living within their bodies. So this is a very qualitative phenomenon, subjective. And being in the world, these are concepts. Grounded theory is about, it brings concepts to us. And that's why I love it so much, because it gives us concepts, categories, things that are real in our social world that we can understand. And then she has therapy outcomes. You know, what kinds of things were happening there. So during the process, they were activating self-agency, connecting to the self, connecting to others, reframing and enhancing emotional intelligence. I thought that was kind of interesting. You know, our intelligence about our emotions and starting to get in touch with those as we're living with pain. And then just like pre and at the end, these kind of lead to some therapy outcomes: pain reduction, sense of control, acceptance, emotional health, activity, engagement, resilience. And then kind of a side piece of this process is here. This is some more of the process of what we do in our as we're living with pain, I guess you could say, and trying to do well with it. Activating self-agency, connecting to self, self-awareness, mind-body connection, autobiographic integration, non-judgmental acceptance, and so forth. So that's broadening and building our self, and then it can lead to these kinds of things, and then it kind of becomes if you can work into your life. Thank you. It can probably help your life, right? You know, I've been through pain periods. I'm sure everyone here has. And we have to deal with that. We can't just keep taking drugs to dull it, because they're addicted for one thing. So I thought it was a really cool study. That's the bottom line. I thought it was a cool study. Very fascinating study. And going back to that, on this, because this is the final model, you see these little asterisks with on some of the okay, like see that right there? The ones that have asterisks on it, they use quantitative measurement instruments for that. This is not based on coding and showing the outcome of qualitative data. These were actual instruments that are widely used in the field. So she had some well-respected quantitative instruments as well. So that adds another kind of justification to the grounded theory. That's what it does. And that's why I think it's so cool. And that's why I think it's, quote, stronger, because we've got both quantitative and qualitative data and justification. So for me, that's stronger. So you'll see that on a lot of the variables here. Yeah, see there's one, see the asterisk there and asterisk there. So this was actually a mixed methods experiment, and some of these don't have any asterisks on them, but it still emerged because she collected interviews again and qualitative data in the experiment. And now this is what we're going to call the overarching, the big research question, the mixed methods research question. That's kind of a weird word, but this is really the question I hear. There it is. That was the question of this research study. It's framed a little bit in methodological language, sorry, but it just could be like, I saw that on a SpongeBob episode, by the way. He said, do you see the episode? It's a what problem? Oh, is this what I'm doing, Amy? Thank you. Science people, see that? So what theoretical model grounded in qualitative and quantitative data explains, this is the big theoretical question after that, explains the therapeutic factors and mechanisms of dance movement therapy for resilience building in people with chronic pain? That's the question. That's the big question. And since it was a mixed methods grounded theory, in grounded theory, that's all we need. We could just operate right there. That's all we need. We could just go with that. But she also had some quantitative 1 through 4. These is kind of quantitative questions that were some of the things that she measured using quantitative data. What is the average change in pain intensity and psychological outcomes from pre to post test measures? What is the participant perceived effect? That's a little mixed there actually, but they have instruments to measure these sorts of things, And then these were a couple of more focused. See, these are more focused. These are sub-questions or more focused questions or more qualitative focused questions and more quantitatively focused questions that all operate under that larger question. This is qualitative. What are the factors and mechanisms in building resilience for people in chronic pain? What is the experience of people with chronic pain as they participate in this experiment? And here's kind of a mixed methods question. To what extent do the quantitative and qualitative results converge, diverge, and how do they converge or converge? I'm glad you told me what's causing it. It doesn't always work, though. Okay. So I know time's almost over here. So some quantitative, here's some outcomes that they measure quantitatively. Here's some things they measured or they studied qualitative. I know measurement's not a popular word in qualitative research, but here's some things they understood and examined. and some analysis approaches they use for that. And then she used some statistical analyses over there, analysis variance, and all those beautiful, all those cool things. And these are just some results. And I believe these are effect sizes, D. The participant reported significant improvements in these things. And anything has a D, that's going to be a quantitative measure. So they saw some changes in some of those. And here's some qualitative themes that came from the study. And these are concepts. These are concepts in the theory. In the grounded theory, these are categories. These are concepts. These are conceptual. And they're a huge part of grounded theory. And that's why I love grounded theory so much, because it's a conceptual theory. That's what excites me about it. So, you know, you've got mobilizing, activating, self-agency, emotional intelligence, and all these sorts of things. And this is called a joint display in mixed methods. So you kind of show some qualitative and show some quantitative, and then you see if they converge, diverge, and so forth. And often a reason for divergence could be measurement. It's often complexity and different views. Different methods kind of have their own glasses. You know, they see different things, just like paradigms. Paradigms all have their set of glasses of what they're going to look for. And I believe that's it. Yeah. And those are the two publications for it. Now, I had something on causation, but I think my time's out now, right? But it's in there, and you can take a peek at it for causation, because it also did some work I think is very innovative in studying cause and effect. And qualitative research has been completely afraid of doing, because the quantitative people just try to stomp them out of the world. And qualitative research does have information about causation. It tends to be more local and event. You know, if this thing works 100%, I turn it like that. It does one thing, it does another thing, right? Did I do a randomized experiment on that? No. So we can't silence. Qualitative has a lot to add. And we want to have educational theories that work fairly generally, but also will work. Here's where it hits the road. The rubber hits the road. That's one of our things. Is in local schools. Will it work here? And when you bring these things together, that sort of causation, I think it's an innovation. That's what I believe in the causal literature. That's it.
Who's going to be first?
Thank you, Professor, for a very interesting lecture. And as a person who makes methodologies, I have encountered a few problems, and I would like to ask you how to deal with them. So the first problem is that when you use mixed methodologies, you also mix not only qualitative and quantitative methods, but also approaches from different sciences.
Yes, I love that.
Yeah,
Sorry.
Yeah, I love it too, and I use it. Yeah, of course, I love it. But there are some problems that I have encountered. So the first one is that when you do it, in fact, there is no one who is fully satisfied with your results and with your methodologies. So, for example, I am a geographer who uses philologist methods because I'm most interested in
Did you say geography?
Geography and philology.
Good. Okay, cool.
Yeah, and when I try to talk about my findings among geographers, they said, "Oh, okay, this is interesting, but you have kept this, and this methods from geography." And they concentrate on geographical aspects because they don't know philological ones, and they don't want to talk about it to avoid the things that they don't know.
Right.
And I had the same problems while I received a review of my dissertation. My reviewer said that at the beginning he hated it because he had to study too much to understand it. So this is the one problem, and I had the same when I am at philologist conferences, and I listen to philologists, and they try to adapt some methods, some approaches from geography, and I have the same feeling that they omitted something, that there should be something more, that they should do it in a different way. So this is the first thing. The second thing is that when we try to adapt,
Let me interrupt real quick. In one sense, you already gave them something more, but they're saying they want more. But keep going.
yeah. The second thing is terminology. So when we adapt methods from different science, we also adapt their terminology, but sometimes we change it.
Right. Yes.
For example, there is a term in geography called biogeography, and there is a term called geobiography. And for geographers, those are two separate, completely different things. And for philologists, in fact, it doesn't matter if I said at the beginning bio or geo.
Yes.
And there are some problems with common terminology, how to use it. Because from my point of view, the problem is that when people try to mix methodologies, they don't cooperate enough with the scientists from different fields. But I would like to know what is your opinion on this matter. Thank you.
Well, all of those are certainly problems. I think all of those are valid problems, and humans exist in groups, right? That's where we hang together each other. This goes back to a long period of time, to put it mildly. So when we understand our world through those, so I think the biggest answer for me is it goes back to justification again. I'll get to the language thing after this. In terms of your study, anticipate when you're writing your manuscript, anticipate their criticisms before you submit it, and then answer those questions and justify your particular research study before you send it to them. We can anticipate what they're going to say. Well, they're not going to like this, and another place is not going to like this. One thing I do in a lot of my writings, I'll say a word and then I'll put a slash and I'll say another word, and they mean roughly the same thing. So, but they're coming from different literatures. I do that a good bit in my writing, because the way language operates is, I'm doing language now, I think, is we have different words for the same thing. And I mean, the same thing is continually discovered, again. And, and Newton and Leibniz invented calculus, all of these things. It's not just like a magic one thing, different languages. We have different words. But the beauty of that is those different words often have some beautiful additional understandings operating in them. That's something that I think is really exciting. Why do they want to call validity trustworthiness and qualitative research? A lot of beautiful and exciting thinking and ideas are coming out of that. And so for research quality, fairly often I'll go research quality, validity / trustworthiness / legitimation. And each of those has some different positions and information and knowledge. So I do that. But how to dealing with bringing new concepts, mixed methods went through the same thing. And some people were on the one, well, let's don't change the words. But qualitative, as it developed, they created new words, such as validity. Just take that one. And we decided we would maybe come up with a new language, some new words for it. And that is good, but it's also bad. It has problems too, because well, that's just validity. That's just that, that's just that. So there's strengths and weaknesses of doing that. And then you have to figure out will it be accepted? Will it be useful? Will it be pragmatic? Will it help the world? And so forth. So, but in terms of getting into your field, young people have to come in. It could be, but when we're old, we can still create some new things, can't we? Oh, people, let's have for the old people here. We can still generate, but we have to bring it in a way that can operate and write about it. You can write about just that process thing to try to get that word into the language. And the answer, again, it goes back to, I think, second thing I said today is it's about justification. You have to, whatever knowledge you're producing, you have to show why you believe it's justified. That is, what kind of knowledge is it? You don't have to be explicit about that, but you can if you want to. And why is this? Why it's a useful kind of knowledge, and why it is quality knowledge. So why it has met certain standards that we consider important for knowledge. So, and that's totally connected to anticipate the criticisms that the reviewers or the literature itself will have. And you can work yourself in there more quickly if you anticipate it and justify it. Believe me, there'll still be criticism, right? We know that. There's still going to be some. So you have plenty of those. But just justify it as best you can and argue with justification as much as you can why this is important. And we have to do that in all of research anyway. We have to argue, about why. But you guys are the expert on language, remember? What are you asking me about this? But what we're really talking about here is the social process of language and, the cross-cultural, cross-language process. And, in some ways we can view one of the qualitative big things was all the world is narrative. All the world is a narrative, right? It's got some, it's got some truth to that. All the world is text, Foucault and Derrida and some of these famous philosophers, and that's how they're framing things and looking at things. But to change the field, do it one-on-one. Go to the conferences, and this is especially for the doctoral student. Go to the conferences, okay? And you'll meet people, and you'll talk about things, and you'll bring ideas together. You'll find something you're both interested in, and then you'll start talking about it. And you say, yeah, that's really interesting. I think this would help. And I think this will help. That's all of a sudden you've got a collaborative study. Most of my research has, over the past 20 years, has been collaborative. I rarely write a single person stuff anymore because I feel like I always have some added value from having additional person working with me on it. And in terms of that, sometimes get someone from let's say someone's criticizing something, get someone to collaborate with that's in that camp, to collaborate with you on that study. And he's going to help frame it, or she, I'll just use she for now, okay? Help frame it in a way that makes sense to that place where the criticism is coming from. I think collaboration is a very big strategy to use for these sorts of things. You can follow up if you want, whatever. You want to follow up? You want a follow-up question? Okay. Some questions, yes.
So thank you for a very inspiring lecture, and I would be interested in one particular thing that you mentioned briefly, and this is autoethnography. So how can you combine autoethnographic methods with quantitative research. I would be interested if you can just elaborate on it.
And interesting that I touched this a little bit earlier. We could view autoethnography as a methodology, and I think that's the way people are viewing it when they use it. We can also view it as a method of gaining knowledge, how we do it, and just even a traditional qualitative autoethnography. You could still collect something quantitative about yourself. You know, how many colleges did you go to? What was the predominant narrative in your culture? You know, what were the big impact? Remember, this is all quantitative stuff. And let that just come into the language of what you're doing. And by definition, in terms of mixed methods research, if you have anything that's measured quantitatively, just say how many times. Now it's all of a sudden, okay? It's that simple from a logical perspective. You know, logic is where it's true or it's false. So you pass the logical test if you add anything quantitative to it. So in your autoethnography, you could develop a questionnaire to get someone else's perspectives about it. Like I actually did this once with my brother, and I didn't develop a questionnaire, but that's my brother, by the way. To see what he saw regarding me, you know, because in autoethnography, I think we're trying to understand. I'm not an expert on autoethnography, but I think we're trying to understand our development and how it happens. And then we start applying it to, you helped me so much last night, to like, why are so many lower level school or kindergarten teachers leaving the field? And that's part of the autoethnography. And now that's bringing something beyond just a single individual's life story. Because narrative research is good with life stories. And good narrative research should be autoethnography. It should have that in it, I think. Because, you know, if we have any self-awareness, we want to try to understand. But then that starts bringing something else that can bring it into practice. And in terms of, let's say that, we could certainly have, we say, well, I think we should go ask these teachers. Maybe we should do a survey of the teachers who left the field. And that's some quantitative stuff in there. So basically, logically, if there's anything quantitative you can bring into it, bring it into it. And it's now mixed.
Thank you.
Yeah, Professor, thank you for your inspiration. Now you go on of modern culture. So not only language, but also culture.
Yes.
I would like to ask you, what do you think about tradition of hermeneutics? How far?
Hermeneutics?
Yes, yeah. That's right. How far is this tradition, from your point of view, of mixed method? How close? How we can compare it? If so.
Okay. I see hermeneutics as it is a methodology. It might be a method. We could probably even say it's a method. But it's also a philosophy of science in a sense. Hermeneutics is what it's talking about is continual interpretation of text, usually, you know, being the traditional origin around the Bible. I mentioned Peter Abelard's Sic et Non book earlier. I mean, what we do is continually hermeneutics. It's interpretive. There's no way around it. We can, even when we have quantitative instruments and measurements, we still have to interpret what it means. and we still want it to improve it over time. In quantitative research, construct validation never ends. It's not like we're there now, and I'm telling you what I take out of hermeneutics. So for me, dialectical pluralism is certainly hermeneutical. I would say that's an important part of it. So it's not a direct comparison, but I think it's certainly important for it. You guys probably could comment on hermeneutics up there. The linguistic, philologist, language. Would anyone like to volunteer?
They probably still don't know. They are actually my students.
Are they your students?
Yes, they are my students. And it's linguistics for business, or called specialized linguistics, actually. So they are not so well educated in methodology.
Yes, I hear.
Yes. Yeah, but we definitely use hermeneutics.
Yes. That's great.
So I have a little bit off-topic question. I was during her lecture wonder how much during your lifetime social science has changed. Like, do you consider the core of the social science, like the paradigms, as something truly?
Yes.
From the
Is there anything that's not?
Okay, that's great.
Was it Heraclitus said, "You never step into the same river twice," right? Change is constant. So it's just how big a change, and many changes are in general, either or logic doesn't work very well for theories, for things we argue about, for change, and continuum. I like to use continuums or continuum. Change. Well, how much did it change? Was it a categorical change, or was it a little tiny change? Was it a pretty good change? Was it a big change? See on that, like, what has changed? So one thing I argue a lot is, and I got this concept from Charles Sanders Peirce, is to try to think in terms of continuums, and get away from the either or viewpoint. And when we're talking about these different concepts concepts can be similar. And if you use a Venn diagram, they can have some things in common. And that's how language works. And I'm playing with language again. Look up virtually any word in the dictionary, in the English dictionary. How many definitions do they have for that word? We've got multiple definitions for these words. So it's not either or stuff here. And that's why it's important to explain what you mean by that word, or make it somehow implicit in what you're writing.
So do you maybe look forward, or maybe yearn of something specific to change in the field of, I don't know, like paradigms of the social science in the close future?
Yeah. Well, I was trained in the 70s, and we didn't, in psychology, we talked about theory some. There was no discussion of paradigms. Paradigm was not a word. The concept in 1962, when Thomas Kuhn's The Structure of Scientific Revolutions, kind of put that word on the map. It was around before then, but it put the word on the map in philosophy of science. But in psychology, my first field, we never learned anything about it. And our doctoral students, and they have a combined clinical and counseling PhD at my school, they don't get that word. So one thing I see is the word is used more now. So that's a change. And it's certainly, Thomas Kuhn's book was very important on natural science as well. And they started thinking, maybe I have a paradigm here. Maybe I'm working in a paradigm. Maybe that's a paradigm example. Maybe this is kind of a community. And we certainly see science works that way. And, you know, science is not just perfect where we got robots just being completely objective, right? That's not happening. And in terms of publishing and getting things, you know, this is a social process too. So I see big changes. And in sociology, we learned about Marx, Weber, and Durkheim. Those are classic theorists. You know, Marx is the conflict one, functionalism is the things work together and fulfill functions, and then symbolic interactionism and people interacting, and there's lots of things happening in there. So, and that's why grounded theory came about. But grounded theory was actually out before I was trained in psychology, but I never heard anything about it. So just huge changes. And in terms of, there's no such thing called mixed methods research. You know, that whole concept was, the term itself kind of came from the first handbook, Sage Handbook of Mixed Methods Research. Tessicori and Tedley used the term mixed methodology in 1998. And I think that's where we should have stuck with. But anyway, we'll use what we have because it communicates. So now it's in Word, it has been reified, and it helps to communicate. So I've seen a lot of changes. One of the things I was very interested in psychology is how much have we learned, you know, over these years? Because I was kind of thinking, you know, don't we already know all this stuff? You know, I mean, John Dewey, William James, and so on with the names. John Locke. We knew a heck of a lot. But one thing they've done is they've studied it, they've done experiments with it, they've measured it, they've got more precise indicators of it, and we've made refinements on these concepts, and we're putting them together. And, you know, so it's advancing, but I think it advances fairly slow. Psychology, just use that as an example. But in sociology, so much of what is just standard sociology, it was around in 1920. You know, a big idea of, you know, the 5 big institutions of society, you know, family, economy, politics, religion, education. You know, every society in the world, we can go study them on those kinds of things. So that hasn't changed. Theories, that's kind of a theoretical concept for me. That theory, I haven't seen a massive change in that other than maybe seeing some more institutions, that is ways of doing things, not organization, are important for us to look at. So I've tried to be an observer of changes in our understanding over time. And then I could go into methods and methodology and whatever else you want for fun, you know. And you guys are observing in your lifetimes. You know, I'm just a lot older, so I've seen more changes, and I've certainly looked at a number of things. I could ask my brother about changes in musicology. You know, he's a couple of years, he's a year older than me, and you know, or any of you on your expertise. What have you seen? And so I see a lot, but I don't see as categorical, like big changes. I see change more as incremental, with some clearly categorical sort of big changes at lots of points, but they're not as big as we think they are. I don't know if I got to where you wanted, but
no, quite. We are after. Excuse me. We are at the 15 minutes after.
Okay.
So if you don't mind, 1 to the last question.
Okay, sure.
Yeah. First,
that's called social change.
To the last questions.
So I was wondering about what you are just said about the mixing the old data or maybe a methods and something like this. And maybe I don't grasp your idea correctly, but actually I would like to ask you why we should take a concept of mixing the methods which in our methodology, in our research projects, if hardly sometimes this situation apply to the reality. So I will just give you an example. So where we just take whatever we color we like, and we're just mixing it all together, we just got nothing. Or for example, where we want to repair the car, so there is a specific procedure in order to repair this car, and we couldn't just mix all the information or the methods and something like this. And I can just give you many examples in our reality that the mixing data and methods and the techniques couldn't bring us to the good outcome.
Yes, okay. I like that. In terms of mixing, they thought a lot about that word mixing, right? And that's why I use this both and logic. We don't have to literally mix. It can be it can bring some things together. And the reason that we're bringing mixed in, I can play with your specific example, but also is because they were separated. See, that's what quantitative science and qualitative science, they broke it up. And we're just trying to say, let's put it back together naturally to help us advance science and understand better. And applying that to your example of the car, we don't have to mix, we don't have to combine necessarily. We just want to produce what will be a useful color there. And I mean, just think of mixing colors. I think all colors, do we have such things as pure color, black or white, are those considered pure? But anyway, we have so many different colors just naturally. So many things are already mixed. So the field was exploded in some ways, science, into the quantitative and the qualitative. And a big part of qualitative also was the postmodernism. That was a big part of, and Thomas Kuhn's work to start questioning, what are scientists really objective, and is this really the truth, and so forth. So it was a good explosion, but in some ways we're trying to just bring them back together so they can operate naturally again. So mixing is not necessarily that one word. We just want to, that's my pragmatism part. I want to answer my research questions. And with my values in it, I want to try to solve problems in the world. And a problem could be a curiosity too. I'm curious about this person or this school, whatever it might be. That can all be part of that.
So maybe I didn't understand you right, but at the beginning, I thought that you can mix whatever you want to, whatever it works, actually.
Yeah, I said that, but okay. I'm trying to motivate people. And what I meant to say, and what I usually say is carefully, systematically, thoughtfully, creatively, in a way that should be helpful. So I would never say you can mix everything. I don't mean that.
Okay. So because that you just said that you can mix in order to answer your research questions. But the most important for me, it's not the answer the research questions, but to uncover or discover the truth. Because you can answer the research question and still be far away from the truth. So that's why we are producing a lot of articles, but we are not producing the knowledge. I don't know. I don't know if you if you agree with me.
Well, I think to a significant degree, I don't agree with that, because I think that's the question of analytic philosophy, and it's looking for the truth. So I've written a good bit about this, and I think what we obtain in empirical research are working truths. What you obtain are the best truths we have at this point in the infinite, we might say, line of history. So we have truths, but Charles Sanders Peirce said that at the end, taking it back to a research question, at the end of all possible research, at the end of time, some could come more quickly than others, you'll get the truth. So Charles Sanders Peirce is kind of a logician, and in logic, that's where things are true or false. But in inductive logic, things are not true or false. They're highly probable or highly unlikely, or and so forth. So, so in a sense, we're all motivated by searching for the truth. Okay, that's a motivation. That's why we do these things. We're looking for it. But in terms of actually getting it, that's another question. And for me, I'm happy living in the inductive world that I live in, of getting the best truth I can now, while working toward what I think might be a truth. But I'm not ultimately convinced that that there is a single truth, because most things, for most ontological objects, we can say multiple true things about that object. Take that speaker there. What is that? That's a speaker, right? But is it also true that that speaker has a lot of different components in it? Is also true that a speaker relies on some form of electricity at this point in history. So we can say multiple true things about the same thing. That's my take. And that's cool. I'm fascinated with yours too.
Okay, but you know, when it comes to the reality, okay, so you need to just make a decision. For example, if you have a surgery and the doctor is supposed to have to, and you have to have an operation, okay,
Yes,
and you will say, so there is a lot of truth and there is a lot of different procedures and you can mix whatever you want to. So
I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying you mix whatever you want. And with that, with surgery, we make mistakes in surgeries. So it's not always the true, perfect one to do. And in statistical analysis, we've got type 1, type 2 errors. We make mistakes. So it's not necessarily we did the true thing, but we certainly want to do what we think is most likely to work for that patient. You know?
there is several solutions, but the bunch of them are better than the others.
Yes, but better is an average statement. Lots of things interact. That is it better for this individual? Or when you say better, is it better for every single individual in the universe? Better? Lots of things interact with the person.
Yeah, and the last question on the end, could you give us some examples of meta criteria of combining to make our research projects more innovative, more creative?
Yeah. Well, look at the presentation I did in February. Look at the different kinds of mixed methods, legitimation, and that just means validity, okay, or trustworthiness. We just use that word. And one is called etic legitimation. And what that says is to try to gain some understanding of the insider's perspectives, as well as stepping back and having somewhat of a, quote, more objective understanding of it, and bring those together in your statement. And in terms of actually writing the research study, add some, we can have some measures, but we also want to have some themes in it, you know, and for that, to help justify, provide some quotations. Quote, give us, if you say this was something, then give us some example quotes. And that started to take us into the imic part a little bit. This is how they said it in their words. And this is, if we try to understand, that's how they felt it. You know, that was in there. So that's kind of the etic legitimation. And then I've got a whole lot of them. I'm not sure how many I can remember right at this moment, but what is pragmatic legitimation? Did the research study, answer the research questions as best as we could? And does it have some applicability in the world? When you're writing your article, can you make it so that, like the mom test, what would mom say? I've done that all. I had a kind of a strong mother, and she had opinions. But what would the mom test say about it?
You guys probably could comment on hermeneutics up there. The linguistic, philologist language. Would anyone like to volunteer?
They probably still don't know. They are actually my students.
Are they your students?
Yes, they are my students. And it's linguistics for business, or specialized linguistics, actually. So they are not so well educated in methodology and methods. So yes. Yeah, but we definitely use hermeneutics.
Yes.
In linguistics,
That's,
of course.
that's great.
So I have a little bit off-topic question, if I may. I was during her lecture wondering how much during your lifetime social science has changed. Like, do you consider the core of the social science, like the paradigms, as something fluid?
Yes.
Okay.
That's great. Well, Heraclitus says, you never step into the same river twice, right? Change is constant. So
that's
this is how big a change, and many changes are in general, either or logic doesn't work very well for theories, for things we argue about, for change, and continuum. I like to use continuums or continuum. Change. Well, how much did it change? Was it a categorical change, or was it a little tiny change? Was it a pretty good change? Was it a big change? See on that, like what is change? So one thing I argue a lot is, and I got this concept from Charles Sanders Peirce, is to try to think in terms of continuums, and get away from the either or viewpoint. And when we're talking about these different concepts can be similar. And if you use a Venn diagram, they can have some things in common. And that's how language works. And I'm playing with language again. Look up virtually any word in the dictionary, in the English dictionary. How many definitions do they have for that word? We've got multiple definitions for these words. So it's not either or stuff here. And that's why it's important to explain what you mean by that word, or make it somehow implicit in what you're writing.
So do you maybe look forward, or maybe yearn of something specific to change in the field of, I don't know, like paradigms of the social science in the close future?
Yeah. Well, I was trained in the 70s, and we didn't, in psychology, we talked about theories of, there was no discussion of paradigms. Paradigm is not a word. The concept in 1962 when Thomas Kuhn, the structural scientific revolution, kind of put that word on the map. It was around before then, but it put the word on the map in philosophy of science. But in psychology, my first field, we never learned anything about it. And our doctoral students, and they have a combined clinical and counseling PhD at my school, they don't get that word. So one thing I see is the word is used more now. So that's a change. And it's certainly, Thomas Kuhn's book was very important on natural science as well. And they started thinking, maybe I have a paradigm here. Maybe I'm working in a paradigm. Maybe that's a paradigm example. Maybe this is kind of a community. And we certainly see science works that way. And, you know, science is not just perfect where we got robots just being completely objective, right? That's not happening. And in terms of publishing and getting things you know, this is a social process too. So I see big changes. And in sociology, we learned about Marx, Weber, and Durkheim. Those are our classic theories. You know, Marx is the conflict one, functionalism is the things work together and fulfill functions, and then symbolic interactionism and people interacting, and there's lots of things happening in there. So, and that's why grounded theory came about. But grounded theory was actually out before I was trained in psychology, but I never heard anything about it. So just huge changes in terms of, there's no such thing called mixed methods research. You know, that whole concept was, the term itself kind of came from the first handbook, Sage Handbook of Mixed Methods Research. Tessa Corey and Tedley used the term mixed methodology in 1998, and I think that's where we should have stuck with. But anyway, we'll use what we have, because it communicates. So now it's in Word, it has been reified, and it helps to communicate. So I've seen a lot of changes. One of the things I was very interested in psychology is how much have we learned, you know, over these years? Because I was kind of thinking, you know, don't we already know all this stuff? You know, I mean, John Dewey, William James, and so on with the names. John Locke. We knew a heck of them. But one thing they've done is they've studied it, they've done experiments with it, they've measured it, they got more precise indicators of it, and we've learned, made refinements on these concepts, and we're putting them together. You know, it's advancing, but I think it advances fairly slow. Psychology, just use that as an example. But in sociology, so much of what is just standard sociology, it was around in 1920. You know, a big idea of, you know, the 5 big institutions of society, you know, family, economy, politics, religion, education. You know, every society in the world, we can go study them on those kinds of things. So that hasn't changed. Theories, that's kind of a theoretical concept for me. That theory, I haven't seen a massive change in that other than maybe seeing some more institutions, that is, ways of doing things in our organization, are important for us to look at. So I've tried to be an observer of changes in our understanding over time. And then I could go into methods and methodology and whatever else you want. For fun, you know. And you guys are observing in your lifetimes. You know, I'm just a lot older, so I've seen more changes, and I've certainly looked at a number of things. I could ask my brother about changes in musicology. You know, he's a couple of years, he's a year older than me, and you know, or any of you on your expertise. What did you see? And so I see a lot, but I don't see as categorical, like big changes. I see change more as incremental, with some clearly categorical sort of big changes at lots of points, but they're not as big as we think they are. I don't know if I got to where you wanted, but
yeah, quite.
We are after. Excuse me. We are after 15 minutes after.
Okay.
So if you don't mind, 1 to the last question.
Okay, sure.
Okay. First,
That's called
to the last questions.
So I was wondering about what you are just said about the mixing the all data or maybe methods and something like this, and maybe I don't grasp your idea correctly, but actually I would like to ask you why we should take a concept of mixing the methods, which in our methodology, in our research projects,
if hardly sometimes this situation apply to the reality. So I will just give the example. So where we just take whatever we color we like, and we're just mixing it all together, we just got nothing. Or for example, where we want to repair the car, so there is a specific procedure in order to repair this car, and we couldn't just mix all the information or the methods and something like this. And I can just give you many examples in our reality that the mixing data and methods and the techniques couldn't bring us to that good outcome.
Yes, okay. I like that. In terms of mixing, they thought a lot about that word mixing, right? And that's why I use this both and logic. We don't have to literally mix. It can be it can bring some things together. And the reason that we're bringing mixed in, I can play through your specific example, but also is because they were separated. See, that's what quantitative science and qualitative science, they broke it up. And we're just trying to say, let's put it back together naturally to help us advance science and understand better. And applying that to your example, the car. We don't have to mix, we don't have to combine necessarily. We just want to produce what will be a useful color. And I mean, just think of mixing colors. I think all colors, do we have such things as a pure color, black or white, are those considered pure? But anyway, we have so many different colors just naturally. So many things are already mixed. So the field was exploded in some ways, science, into the quantitative and the qualitative. And a big part of the qualitative also was the postmodernism. That was a big part of, and Thomas Kuhn's work to start questioning, what are scientists really objective in? Is this really the truth and so forth? So it was a good explosion, but in some ways we're trying to just bring them back together so they can operate naturally again. So mixing is not necessarily that one word. We just want to, that's my pragmatism part. I want to answer my research questions. And with my values in it, I want to try to solve problems in the world. And a problem could be a curiosity too. And I'm curious about this person or this school, whatever it might be. That can all be part of that.
So maybe I didn't understand you right, but at the beginning I thought that you can mix whatever you want to, whatever you want. Actually.
Yeah, I said that, but I'm trying to motivate people. And what I meant to say, and what I usually say is, carefully, systematically, thoughtfully, creatively, in a way that should be helpful. So I would never say you can mix everything. I don't.
Okay. So because that you just said that you can mix in order to answer your research questions. But the most important for me is not to answer the research questions, but to uncover or discover the truth. Because you can answer the research question and still be far away from the truth. So that's why we are producing a lot of articles, but we are not producing the knowledge. I don't know. I don't know if you if you agree with me.
Well, I think to a significant degree, I don't agree with that, because I think that's the question of analytic philosophy, and it's looking for the truth. The truth. So I've written a good bit about this, and I think what we obtain in empirical research are working truths. What you obtain are the best truths we have at this point in the infinite, we might say, line of history. So we have truths, but Charles Sanders Peirce said that at the end, taking it back to a research question, at the end of all possible research, At the end of time, some can come more quickly than others. You'll get the truth. So Charles Sanders Peirce is kind of a logician, and in logic, that's where things are true or false. But in inductive logic, things are not true or false. They're highly probable or highly unlikely, and so forth. So in a sense, we're all motivated by searching for the truth. Okay, that's a motivation. That's why we do these things. We're looking for. But in terms of actually getting it, that's another question. And for me, I'm happy living in the inductive world that I live in, of getting the best truth I can now, while working toward what I think might be a truth. But I'm not ultimately convinced that that there is a single truth, because most things, for most ontological objects, we can say multiple true things about that object. Take that speaker there. What is that? That's a speaker, right? But is it also true that speaker has a lot of different components in it? Is it also true that a speaker relies on some form of electricity at this point in history? So we can say multiple true things about the same thing. That's my take. And that's cool. I'm fascinated with yours.
Okay, but when it comes to the reality, okay, so you need to just make a decision. For example, if you have a surgery and the doctor supposed to have to, you have to have an operation, okay, and you will say, so there is a lot of truth and there is a lot of different procedures and you can mix whatever you want to. So
I'm not saying that. I'm not saying
that you are really more healthy.
And with that, with surgery, we make mistakes in surgery. So it's not always the true, perfect one to do. And in statistical analysis, you've got type 1, type 2 errors. We make mistakes. So it's not necessarily we did the true thing. But we certainly want to do what we think is most likely to work for that patient. You know?
There are several solutions, but the bunch of them are better than the others.
Yes, but better is an average statement. Lots of things interact. That is it better for this individual? Or when you say better, is it better for every single individual in the universe? Better? Lots of things interact with the person.
Yeah, and the last question maybe is, give us some examples of meta-criteria of combining to make our research project more innovative, more creative.
Yeah. Well, look at the presentation I did in February. Look at the different kinds of mixed methods, legitimation, and that just means validity, okay, or trustworthiness. We just use that word. And one is called etic legitimation. And what that says is to try to gain some understanding of the insider's perspectives, as well as stepping back and having somewhat of a, quote, more objective understanding of it, and bring those together in your statement. And in terms of actually writing the research study, add some, we could have some measures, but we also want to have some themes in it, and for that, to help justify, provide some quotations. Quote, give us, if you say this was something, to give us some example quotes. And that's starting to take us into the image part a little bit. This is how they said it in their words. And this is, if we try to understand, that's how they felt it. That was in there. So that's kind of the etic legitimation. And then I've got a whole lot of them. I'm not sure how many I can remember right at this moment. But what is pragmatic legitimation? Did the research study answer the research questions as best as we could? And does it have some applicability in the world? When you're writing your article, can you make it so that, like the mom test, what would mom say? I've done that all. I had a kind of strong mother, and she had opinions. But what would the mom test say about it? And there's a lot of them, and they're written in most of my stuff and in the presentation I did last time. And if you want a chapter on it, send me an email. But the most important one for me is called multiple validities legitimation. And what that says is to what qualitative kinds of trustworthiness validities might be important to demonstrate, what kinds of quantitative validities might be important to show, and what kinds of mixed methods. So I think that applies to all research, all empirical research. Have you done, and an example for kind of a quantitative experiment, if you're going to talk about causation a lot, you might need an experiment to some degree, or at least an action research experiment, or just an individual experiment. You try something, this happened, or you observe something. I think that's what you need to put into your research study. It needs to be implicit and often explicit, and then the reader reads it, they'll feel like it's justified about talking. Because a lot of qualitative research and grounded theory certainly talks about this does this, and this is how it works. That's implicit causation. Whether we want to call it that or not, I would argue that is some implicit causation. And I think that's fine, and I think it's good, and I'm glad. And I'm glad quantitative research said, no, you can't do grounded theory. Because science doesn't work like that. We try to do the best we can with what we have and add something to the literature. I think, I don't know, but anyway, my short-term memory is not perfect, but add to the literature, you guys. Add to the literature. Add to it, to what you're doing.
Thank you so much for this answer. So, dear participants, Professor, thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.
For the very inspiring and refreshing lectures. Thank you very much for your great sense of humor. Thank you. Dear participants, thank you for the questions and comments, especially for being here. Also, many thanks for the people who are on the other side of screen, who are in the stream in YouTube. Thank you so much for your being with us. So I wish you all very fruitful reflection about methodological issues, especially MMR. And who knows, maybe we will see you soon at the future seminars. So thank you very much once again, and see you in the future.
My email address is right there.
Thank you.
Cheers.